Yes, what you say about the internet there, it's so challenging also because what is a text? What are you translating from?
Yeah.
And the ordinary idea we have from that language to the other language, target source language and target language, we can't. They are not sufficient anymore, and
Yeah.
we have to have other concepts, other ways of thinking about how translation is taking place.
You see, I think this is right. I think, to me, the most interesting thing happening in translation now is that, in one sense, we are looking. When I say we, I think some of the most interesting work in the field is enlarging the boundaries of translation and almost deconstructing the notion of translation itself. What is, for example, an original? I mean, with my students, I've looked many times at if you look at mass international marketing of products, you have so many things that you can buy in 20 different countries, and when you open the packet, the instructions are there in 20 different languages. Those are not translations. There is no original here. What there is a brand product that is then being written for different markets. So the question then is there such a thing as an original? And I think I'm very, very interested in the work. I mean, Edwin Gensler now is working on what he sees as a whole, I don't know if you'd even call it a genre of literature, which involves translation. Translation, books about translation, books written by people who see themselves as translated, is interlingual, well, not just interlingual, but is intercultural movement a form of translation? Who, Jumala Lumpiri, what is she? Is she an Indian American, an American? She has very strong views about who she is. But I think that this is increasingly a fascinating problem for a very, very mixed world with more and more and more people who are speaking a number of languages and shifting in and out between cultures. And I think that the old notion of a fixed and rigid original and a translation, this binary opposition, is really something that if we're translating, what can I think of? If we're translating legal documents or poems or whatever, clearly there is a text and you need to bring it into another language. But at the same time, within translation studies, we do need to be thinking much more broadly about what we understand by translation and whether or not a translation always has to have an original, which I think is now a contentious question.
I agree.
Oh, good.
I agree. Also, we have founded a new journal, and it's called Translation. And the reason why we call it Translation is that we would like to open up a transdisciplinary dialogue and discussion and debate about what is translation. And the only thing we have in common in all the different approaches and disciplines and thoughts and views is the concept translation, but it can be very, very wide, and we have to discuss it, and we have to take into the reflection on translation all these different concepts, even without the original. That is really the foundation of the real translation problem. But maybe today we have to, also because we live in such translational conditions. We are all continuously translating ourselves, and maybe not even from one language to another, but the condition is translational. But where from and where to, it's not really clear anymore in our subjectivity and in our cultures.
I think that's right. And I mean, years ago, I used to do an exercise, because I've taught creative writing for many years. And I used to do a thing with my creative writing groups where I would ask them to produce 3 versions of the same story. And the story was always an imaginary story. I would say to them, okay, here we go. You've lost your job. You know why you've lost your job. There might be dark reasons or whatever, but you've lost your job. And now you have to write 3 letters. You write to your mother. you don't really want to tell your mother that you've lost your job. So you've got to write this ambiguous letter. You've also got to write a letter of application for another job. And you don't know how much that other person might know. And then you write to a friend and tell them the truth. Now, I saw all those forms of writing, in a way, as translations, because they're all translations of the same, if you like, scenario. And you could argue that there is an original. The original is the particular position that the person holds. But you see, I think also that you could move on from that, and you could say that biography, autobiography, life writing, memory studies, trauma studies, all of these fields that have grown and grown and grown in the last few years are all in a way connected with translating. They're all translating experiences, they're all translating texts. I think memory studies, I think the possible link between memory studies and translation studies is an absolutely fascinating one.
Because translation is always a kind of a memory of something.
Absolutely. And you know, then so much of when you read the vast literature on translation is about what has been lost. And I'm particularly interested in seeing how memory studies and translation studies move together increasingly. There's a new journal of memory studies that's been founded, I think, about 2-3 years ago. And I just find this absolutely fascinating because it's not, the two may be coming possibly from different interdisciplinary positions, but they're meeting. And I think this whole question then of meeting, I mean, something else I've written about in the past is translation and travel writing. When you go on a journey and you write about the travel narrative is another form of translation. So I think we have to really, really open the concept of what we understand by translation.